I'm Dr. Annice Barber, and I work with Street Safe New Mexico in Albuquerque. I am an applied linguist, and as an applied linguist, I study the way that language is used in different situations. And the situation I want to talk to you about today is sex trafficking and how sex traffickers use language to lure teens into the trade of sex. We want to learn to know our enemy. There was a study done in 2010 where researchers in Chicago looked at prisoners who were imprisoned for sex trafficking as sex traffickers, and they interviewed those prisoners and to try and understand how sex traffickers work and what motivates them. So this is a quote from one of those people they interviewed from prison. This sex trafficker said, "We eat, drink, and sleep thinking of ways to trick young girls into doing what we want them to do." So traffickers target places with no adults around. They look for places where kids are by themselves, maybe at the mall or on a city bus or online. Also, you might have heard that anyone can be a target, and that is true. Some are at higher risk though, such as homeless teens. Also, of course, we need to be on guard online. My research, however, is on in-person recruitment, but a lot of it likely applies to online recruitment as well. The people that traffickers target are ones that they see as being vulnerable or as especially needy. They might need a job, or they might need a place to sleep, or money, or love, or even drugs. Another quote from a sex trafficker really shows how they put a lot of focus on trying to quickly identify a person that looks desperate. This trafficker said, "Any player can tell you when a girl has the look of desperation, that you know she needs attention or love. It's something that you start to have a sixth sense about." So far this is looking pretty dismal for us, right? Because we have sex traffickers who spend all of their time trying to understand how trafficking works, and then put a lot of effort in just trying to hone their skills. So it seems like so far it looks like all the power is in their hands. But that's actually not true. That's what they want you to think, but the truth is that the power lies with you, not with them. Basically, you're safe as long as you don't believe their words. Language is in fact the recruitment tool used by traffickers. It is how they get their job done, is through the words. They use their words to try and recruit people. So we need to understand their words. We need to understand their language to stay safe from their manipulation. So the plan for today is to learn the lies that traffickers use so you can spot it when you hear it, and to keep yourself safe. There is this great myth, which is really important that we understand it to be a myth, that we can debunk it, because it really takes the power out of our hands. This myth is this idea that kids are commonly grabbed into sex trafficking. We think this because social media and news media wants us to think this. They want us to believe that children are almost in constant danger of being grabbed off the street and forced into trafficking. But this, in fact, is extremely rare to have that happen. It's extremely rare to have a person kidnapped into sex trafficking. What we have to do when you hear a story like that is to pay attention to the whole story. You might look for the moment where the teen made a choice, because the teen has the power in her hands until at one moment she believes the lie that the sex trafficker is saying, believes that trafficker to be safe, and then goes with them, and then she loses her power. So the power is with you up until you turn it away, hand it over, right? Well, here's an example of a case that happened in Indianapolis, where they began the whole segment saying, "Taken and sold," with this dramatic music and dramatic images. They started their segment by stating, "Authorities say human traffickers snatched a 16-year-old girl right off a local street, planning to use her in a prostitution ring." And of course, this sounds like she was taken against her will. There was a moment where she was walking down the street in the dark, and the traffickers pulled up and started talking to her. And for whatever reason, she began to trust them, and they said, "Do you want to ride?" So she got into the car. And then she was trafficked after that. She was taken across state lines and trafficked. So we want to get to a point where we can recognize where the news media is taking us when they're implying that we are being attacked violently and yanked into this situation where in fact we do have a choice at one moment. So the truth of the situation is that snatching is incredibly rare. It's rare because traffickers wouldn't risk their operation that way. They need their victims to choose to stay. So they use psychological persuasion. So why is this distinction important? Why am I making a point of this? Because this false narrative of snatching, violently snatching, it places the power with the aggressor, with the trafficker. But that's not the truth. We need to see ourselves as being empowered, ourselves as being able to determine the outcome on this if we are educated in it. So the truth of it is that we have the power if we can learn how to spot the lies. So what about the violence that you hear about a lot? Why is it that we always hear about violence to do with sex trafficking? Well, it is a very violent crime. After the teens are hooked and are recruited, then and groomed, then they do start controlling them with emotional manipulation, threats, lies, and violence. It starts with deception, that first interaction, and we can find the lies and not even take the bait. So let's look at how deception starts. It's important that you stay suspicious. Here's a quote from another trafficker about the kinds of lies he would tell. He said, "I would tell them I was an agent. I would say I designed clothes. I even told them I sang with certain bands and managed different people." There comes a moment when the teen chooses to believe that lie or not. And your power and your very best defense is being able to identify that lie and not fall for it. Your very best defense lies in that exact moment that they are trying to hook you. I call that moment the hook point. And what is the hook point? There's a lead in, a small talk and stuff, and then there becomes a point where they offer the teen something, a job, or being with their boyfriend or whatever, and then they have to make that choice if they're going to believe that or not. Call it the hook point because it's like fishing. They try this one and they try this one, and they're like, okay, which one of these things is your need? How can I fill your need that I'm gonna be able to pull you in? You're not gonna fall for it, hopefully, as likely to, because you're going to know the kinds of bait that the trafficker is using and how their words, what kinds of words they would be using. So when a trafficker meets a teen, a little over half the time, they try to show romantic interest, like a boyfriend wannabe, right? So a lot of the time that is that. But then some of the time, they're offering to be a benefactor, and they're offering things like food, lodging, or money. Some of the time, they make false job offers, such as modeling or dancing. 17% of the time, it's some other offer, like a sense of adventure or travel. Whatever they find, they're ready to offer anything, because it's all lies anyway, right? They will say whatever it is that will catch the teen. So let's look at a typical conversation. Let's imagine that you have a teen riding home the public bus from school, okay? And maybe they're having a bad day and they look really sad and dejected, because that makes them look more vulnerable, right? So they're more likely to be targeted in those situations. Often when a trafficker first approaches a teen, maybe he comes up and sits down next to her, and maybe he'll just say, "Hey, how are you? Aren't you kind of young to be riding the bus? What are you, like 13 or something?" And she's like, "Are you kidding me? I'm not 13, I'm 15, right?" So he's baiting her to try and get her to react to that. So now she's engaged with him. Somehow she responded to him. She has this communication connection, right? She's already said something to him. Maybe he'll then say something mixed in with other small talk. He also might say something about, where are you from? Do you live around here? Where are you headed? I'm going, and trying to get more information from her, specifically because he's trying to check her connections. How many adults are paying attention to this teen? Because she might say, "Hey, I don't know. I don't know. My parents don't pay attention," or whatever, and then he'll know that she's more vulnerable, right? So this might seem like small talk, but in fact, it's not small talk, because he's first trying to get her engaged, secondly, trying to see how connected she is and how vulnerable she really is. Okay, so after the small talk is over, not over, but the small talk leads into the baiting. So the baiting is when he starts to set himself up as something that he thinks will interest the teen. So he offers some need, some perceived need, offers to fill it, right? And watching for a reaction from that teen. So one of the first things he'll often frame himself as is very exciting and rich, you know, like that's going to draw the girls towards him. He would hope. He might say something like, hey, I don't usually take the bus, but my Mustang is in the shop right now. Have you ever ridden in a convertible, right? Trying to get her to respond to that, and setting himself also as rich. He has a Mustang convertible, right? Or maybe he might say something like, I make great money and I love spending it on my friends. Everyone needs friends like that, right? Already she can see, oh, he's a pretty generous guy. He might be generous with me, right? So he's trying to set himself up that way. And again, are those things true? No, he doesn't own a Mustang. He's not generous, okay? Now, what if the teen doesn't react much to that first one? Well, then he might offer protection, that he's going to somehow take care of her. He might put down other men and emphasize how he will treat her right. For example, I know how to treat a woman. Other guys only want one thing, but I treat a woman like a princess. I hold the car door, I buy them flowers. You're a princess. I would treat you right. These are quotes from people who have escaped attempted trafficking. So from my interviews, they have said that they often will use the word princess or queen. So that could kind of be a red flag right there. Okay, say that the protection one didn't work. What's the next thing they're going to try? Well, the romance is a big one, as I've already said. And they might have other hooks besides these. Each one of these is a hook point. They're trying over and over again. They might say, oh, you're beautiful and underappreciated. You're so beautiful. I love your eye. Again, that's a quote. So he might even say, can I write you a poem or a song, which sounds perhaps surprising. But it seriously happens, because he then writes his phone number on the poem. He writes a poem, puts all this time and effort into it, writes a song, writes his phone number, hands her the paper. Well, people are very likely to take a gift like that because they think, oh, this person put all this time into it. Of course, I'll take a paper. What's the harm in that? But he succeeded in getting his number into her hands. So if she goes home and is having a hard time with her parents or whatever else, she might call this nice guy from the bus, right? So his goal is to get his number into her hand if he uses that tactic. It is important, I guess I want to mention here, that I'm using she for the victim and he for the trafficker. But traffickers can be female. Most traffickers are male, but some can be female. And most of the time, girls are being targeted, but boys can also be targeted. So it could be he or she in either of these cases. So why does it work for the trafficker? Why does the hook point work? That technique works because if the trafficker can successfully meet a need of the teen, because the teen wants whatever the trafficker is offering, and this would then lead to a second meeting. They'll go wherever the job is being offered, or maybe they'll even go with the person right then. They might say, hey, you know a place to sleep tonight? Come with me, I got an extra room. So they need it to move on to the next step. That's the goal, is to get to stage 2. The most common bait, as I said, is romance, and it works because the teen thinks that the trafficker is flirting. Because the trafficker wants the teen to think that I'm flirting with you. I really like you, right? Does he really like her? No, right? He just is doing his job to try and get her attention. Trafficker is not flirting. He's counting on teens to not be able to tell the difference. But how can you tell the difference? There's some really important ways. The reason it's confusing is because it actually looks similar. Flirting, sincere flirting, and a trafficker trying to get a teen with the romance hook can look very similar, because in both cases, the other person approaching, the guy in my, would initiate the conversation, maybe have eye contact, smile, maybe kind of brush against your hand or something, compliment you, and maybe use some encouraging body language, or leaning towards you to show that they're interested in what you're saying. So in this chart, you can see how hook points and flirting have a lot of comparison points. This chart is available in the links below, but I will go through it step by step here. So let's look at the first column, first row. One way not to confuse a hook with a flirt is talking time. So a trafficker talks more. They might ask a couple of questions initially, but overall they do most of the talking because they want to try and persuade you to take the hook while building themselves up. So they're like really busy with a lot of words, right? But if you're flirting, you tend to talk more. So either they talk more or you talk more. So if they talk more, that can be a red flag. In flirting, you talk more because they might ask you questions, but they're more interested in hearing what you have to say, right? They're not working as hard to sell themselves normally off the bat. Another point is monologuing. Okay, so a trafficker, they will even continue talking even if you don't respond. I've had several stories of this happening from my interviewees, where the trafficker just kept going on and on. You know, they're monologuing. Where do you think that would happen in flirting? Well, they usually actually stop talking, right? Because if you don't respond, that shows disinterest. So if they're monologuing, that's a red flag. Confidence level. A trafficker seems super confident. It's like he's done this before, right? Because he has. He's done it professionally. He does it professionally, right? He's super smooth. But flirting, they don't do this professionally, so they tend to fidget a bit. They're like a bit nervous. Maybe they might shift around in their seat or seem a bit uncertain, a little bit maybe, you know, not a lot necessarily, but because his ego's at stake. He's emotionally invested and he wants you to like him. So there's going to be more confidence with the trafficker, really smooth. The trafficker, also looking a little more detailed in the language, has fewer pauses or hesitations, if any, because they don't need to restructure their sentence. They don't need to fix what they're saying. But in flirting, there would be more pauses, hesitations, or restarts. They consider their words, starting and stopping sentences, sometimes to rephrase things because they want to get it right. They want to make a good first impression. Trafficker will come on like a salesman, right? Come on strong. You often feel pressured or uncomfortable. You might not, but it still feels like a salesman, okay? I guess it depends on your situation, but it does feel more pressure, okay? Flirting, you wouldn't really feel pressure because the focus is on getting to know you. They're not trying to sell you anything. Feel pressured, that could be a red flag for a trafficker. Okay, another thing is the offer. So the trafficker is offering something like a room, a job, or protection. Whereas if you're flirting, they just want to date you, they're not offering you a job. They're not offering you a room or protection. So that could be a distinct difference too, a red flag as well. Possible future, the trafficker uses we and us early in the conversation and often. Almost like before you're like, wait, where are we? I mean, he says it too early, right, in the conversation. Maybe he even directly refers to the two of you being together in the future. Like, we'd be so good together, right? But in flirting, they might use might or could when referring to doing things together. We could go to the movies. So the trafficker has more of a would, a more definite future, and the flirting person would have more of a possible future, like a could, a less definite. Let's say that the person doesn't know all this and the hook succeeds. What's next? So this is what would happen next. The first thing is, as I said, you have the recruitment and the hook point, which is what I've already been talking to you about. And after that, the guy is like so nice for like a few months, right? He's like, there's no way this guy's a trafficker. He is so nice to you. He might, however, work on isolating a little bit, like, hey, you just hang out with me a lot. He always wants to be with you, that kind of thing. He's working to gain trust. But it's a really nice time. I'm a person who was trafficked, who said, one girl said, up until this point, they had never tried to touch me. They had not made me ever feel uncomfortable or ever feel unsafe or that they could harm me. So everything was perfect up till this point. And then the abuse begins suddenly and unexpectedly. He might say, hey, you owe me. I've been so good to you all this time that you owe me. So I want you to go out there and have sex with this person and give me the money because you owe me. And then this is controlled through threats, violence, fear, or blackmail. So then that's where the violence comes in the second half of this process. So the goal is to not get caught. You have to look for that hook point. Remember, they won't grab, they will groom. They will try and persuade you with their words. They won't force you at the hook. They won't snatch you off the street, but they will trick you. They will try to trick you. And the bottom line is you need to remember that you are the one in control. You need to be smart and be educated. If you're educated, that gives you the control. Do not get hooked. And the way to not get hooked is to know your enemy. Thank you very much for your time today. I hope you found this presentation to be beneficial and really educational for yourself. Here's a list of the references I used in this presentation, and it can be found in the link below. Thank you very much.